fugitive officials reveal over half of retired officials arrested. 3 Gorges Dam accelerates discharge. Disasters in Chongqing and Hubei result in multiple deaths. Rumors: Beijing news leadership replaced following exposure of chemical and edible oils mixing scandal. CCC Chief of Staff blocks CCP's live organ harvesting, ensure U.S. companies are not exploited. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Fugitive officials reveal over half of retired officials arrested. The Chinese Communist Party's bureaucracy resembles a vast, bottomless black hole. In the last decade alone, more than 2 million party members have faced disciplinary actions, and hundreds of thousands of officials have been subjected to criminal penalties. What are the underlying reasons for this extensive purge? Amidst an environment where corruption pervades all levels, what has been the actual impact of the decade-long anti-corruption campaign on the party's bureaucracy? How has the widespread tendency of officials to lie flat and engage in governance lazily really come about? Let's dive into the disclosures from a former CCP bureau-level official. More than half of retired officials arrested. Mr. Zhou, now residing in the United States, revealed on NTD-TV's Elite Forum program that a palpable sense of fear grips Chinese officials, especially those retired or close to retirement, considered high risk by the state. With around 80,000 active and 300,000 total bureau-level or higher officials, the dismissal of even one can save the state upwards of 30 million yuan, about $4.13 million, primarily from reduced medical and benefit costs. Once these officials are deemed useless, the Communist Party is ready to discard them to save funds. Additionally, these officials often possess significant personal assets, which are subject to confiscation, and their salaries and medical benefits are halted. Thus, the financial implications are vast, potentially amounting to billions. If a fraction of these 300,000 officials, say 100,000 or 50,000, were removed, it would substantially increase state revenues. In many mountainous regions of China, local townships often struggle with funding, resulting in unpaid salaries for township heads and deputies, sometimes for years. Despite this, these positions remain highly sought after due to opportunities for unofficial income. For example, a clerk or tax collector might receive red envelopes containing 1,000 to 2,000 yuan, approximately $138 to $275 from businesses during holidays, significantly supplementing their income. Typically, a public service clerk in China earns a monthly salary of only 5,000 to 6,000 yuan, about $689 to $826. Yet, these officials often aspire to purchase homes in major cities, where real estate prices average around 20,000 yuan, about $2,755 per square meter, an expense far beyond what their formal salaries could cover. This discrepancy raises questions about the true sources of their income. The extent of corruption often involves the manipulation of figures. Leaders require data to be adjusted to suit their narratives. When official assets like paintings are overvalued, for example, what might typically be worth 30 or 50,000 yuan could be appraised at millions, inflating the perceived value illicitly. Mr. Zhou explained that the current approach involves arresting officials before conducting investigations. If you attend a meeting today, you could be taken into custody right in the middle of it. Once detained, you might remain in custody for 1 to 3 months. Previously, Chinese officials faced shuanggui, a strict form of disciplinary detention. Now, once detained, they experience such isolation that they do not see daylight, leading many to contemplate taking their own life. Those who succumb to self-inflicted death leave behind relatives who can retain some of their assets. This scenario is described in Chinese as die to tear up the case, meaning that if you die, you won't be investigated. This method essentially acts as a form of terror governance within the country. This is termed terror governance because it employs a strategy of fear through sporadic investigations and arrests, one day one official, the next day another. This tactic instills fear, silences dissent, and ensures dedication. However, arrests are not made daily. For instance, deputy ministerial-level officials might be arrested only once or twice a year, while ministerial-level officials could face arrest once or twice every month or two. Bureau-level officials are arrested more frequently, with 2 or 3 arrests occurring monthly in any given province or city. At the county level, the aggregate numbers are substantial. The primary motivation behind these actions is political control, to intimidate officials into silence and obedience. A secondary motive relates to the nation's struggling economy and poor financial state, which drives the need for these investigations. The numbers involved in these investigations are even higher than those publicly disclosed. Unspoken rules change, CCP officials disoriented. On the Elite Forum program, senior editor Shan stated that effective management relies heavily on a set of core values. Without such values, the CCP has abandoned traditional principles like communism and religion, turning instead to fear as its main tool of governance. This approach relies on instilling fear to control officials and society. Additionally, Guo Jun, the editor-in-chief of Epoch Times Hong Kong, stated that the ideology of communism in China had fundamentally collapsed by the 1980s, especially after the 1989 democracy movement. The CCP regime now primarily relies on violence and fear, exploiting basic human survival fears. Nevertheless, a society requires a unified set of values to function. In place of communism, nationalism and statism have emerged as the new orthodoxies, both ideologies inherently necessitating an enemy. For nationalism and statism, the enemy includes foreign powers; for communism, it was the capitalists. This mentality has led to an excessive creation of enemies, resulting in widespread self-inflicted difficulties across China. Ms. Guo further noted that the CCP operates as crony capitalism, creating stark wealth disparities in China. As ideological campaigns for shared prosperity intensify, Beijing revives socialist ideologies, a tactic once used by Bo Xilai. This revival shifts long-standing CCP practices and unwritten rules, leaving officials at all levels struggling to adapt. Since China lacks a rule of law framework, it depends on internal rules rather than formal legislation. However, recent changes to these internal and unwritten rules have left officials disoriented. From absolute power to rising discontent among officials. Independent television producer Li Jun discussed on the Elite Forum how the current political system in mainland China is overwhelmingly controlled by top leaders. He recalled Zhou Yongkang stating that at his level, one could essentially act with impunity. Indeed, this isn't limited to members of the Politburo Standing Committee. Even provincial party secretaries, city party secretaries, and heads of departments often enjoy a similar breadth of unchecked power within their domains. In a previous CCTV interview, a city party secretary candidly expressed, "Now that I'm in charge, I can do whatever I want." This type of behavior is alarmingly common within the system, where subordinates invariably extol the virtues of their leaders, regardless of their performance, praising their supposed wisdom. Instances like these are not isolated, they are a widespread phenomenon. Moreover, the anti-corruption efforts appear to have introduced a new dynamic of instilling fear among officials. Historically, we've seen high-ranking officials engage in fierce power struggles, with factions working to undermine each other. This is indeed prevalent. For instance, Xi Jinping's anti-corruption drive stemmed from a need to assert control over dissenters who belonged to the previous Jiang faction. This tactic has been replicated at local and provincial levels, cultivating an atmosphere of fear. Today's officials are markedly more compliant than a decade ago. With frequent arrests and severe punishments meted out, from department heads to bureau chiefs to deputy provincial governors, the fear of reprisal is pervasive. Previously, we spoke of public outrage reaching a boiling point. Now, it appears that a similar sentiment of resentment is simmering among the officials themselves. 3 Gorges Dam accelerates discharge, disasters in Chongqing and Hubei result in multiple deaths. On July 11 at 6 p.m., the Hydrology Bureau of the Yangtze River Water Resources Commission under the Ministry of Water Resources of China officially declared the formation of the second flood of 2024 in the upper Yangtze River. Intense rainfall significantly increased the water flow from the Min River, Jialing River, and the area surrounding the Three Gorges. Consequently, the water inflow to the Three Gorges reservoir surged to 50,000 cubic meters per second. As we've reported previously, the Three Gorges reservoir initiated flood discharge operations on July 10 by opening 2 spillway gates. The number of gates opened increased incrementally each day, reaching 9 by the evening of July 14. Forecasts indicate a significant flood risk for the reservoir area on July 15, with an expected flood peak involving a water flow of 45,000 cubic meters per second. The Three Gorges stretch along the main channel of the Yangtze River from Baidi City in Fingjie County, Chongqing, to Nanjing Pass in Yichang City, Hubei Province, spanning 193 kilometers. Therefore, the flood discharge has impacted not only Chongqing but also Hubei. At least 6 people have died in Chongqing. According to detailed reports from CCTV and other mainland media sources, between 7 a.m. on July 13 and 7 a.m. on July 14, Chongqing was struck by frequent lightning and intense rainfall, leading to at least 6 fatalities. 4 deaths resulted from geological disasters triggered by the rains, affecting a family of 3 generations, while 2 others died by drowning. Dianjiang County recorded its highest daily rainfall since meteorological records began, impacting over 43,000 people, leading to the collapse of 18 houses and damage to nearly 200 more. Videos reveal floodwaters sweeping into residential areas, fully submerging the first floors of some homes and cars. Netizens have commented, when there's a water shortage downstream, the Three Gorges stores water for power generation. When flooding occurs downstream, the Three Gorges releases water to alleviate the flood. Multiple areas in Hubei province suffer disaster, at least 4 dead. On July 14, intense floods in Hubei caused a vehicle to be swept away while crossing a bridge in Fua town, Suizhou, leading to the deaths of 4 individuals. That same morning, the Suizhou Meteorological Station issued a red alert for heavy rainfall. The floods have impacted various parts of Hubei severely, with significant street flooding in Xiangyang City. Tianmen on July 13 was particularly hard hit, resembling an expansive sea with numerous hazards on the roads, including displaced manhole covers caused by the torrential rains. Netizens from Hubei on Weibo voiced their frustration, questioning the lack of media coverage on the intense rains affecting the province and wondering if such events have become the norm. Meanwhile, there is a notable skepticism about the official death tolls reported by state media, attributed to the CCP's habitual understatement of disaster impacts, suggesting that the actual figures could be much higher. Experts warn of potential flooding in 7 major river basins due to reservoir discharges. An official from the Ministry of Water Resources, speaking to CCTV on July 14, highlighted that the forecasted critical flood period could see flooding across all the 7 basins, including the Songhua, Liao, Hai, Yellow, Huai, Yangtze, and Pearl rivers. The ministry also noted that the large number of small to medium-sized reservoirs and silt dams, which are at risk and have low flood resistance, place significant strain on flood management efforts. Moreover, numerous water conservation projects are ongoing, some during the flood season, heightening the risk of mishaps. Radio France Internationale reported ongoing flood issues across China since June, with recent breaches like the one at Dongting Lake in Hunan resulting in significant losses. The public has raised concerns about the inefficacy of the tens of thousands of reservoirs in China, which are suspected not only of failing to prevent floods but also of worsening them. Hydrology expert Wang Weiluo, based in Germany, informed Radio France Internationale that recent floods, including those in Meizhou, Guangdong, and Guilin, Guangxi, were all triggered by reservoir discharges. Rumors: Beijing news leadership replaced following exposure of chemical and edible oils mixing scandal. Following the publication of a Beijing news investigative report that unveiled the mixing of chemical and edible oils in unclean tankers, a significant public uproar ensued. In response, the State Council of the CCP declared that it would conduct an investigation. However, nearly 2 weeks later, while no official findings had been released, rumors circulated that the editor-in-chief and other top executives at the Beijing News had been dismissed. Consequently, the X platform was buzzing with rumors on July 15. Former Beijing news reporter Chu Chaoxin wrote on his WeChat public account on the 14th that after the Beijing news exposed the mixing of kerosene and edible oil in tanker trucks, it faced attacks from some utterly conscienceless villains, which is disheartening. In his article People Without Conscience, Chu Chaoxin noted that in China's current media landscape, the press focuses on public welfare and food safety for the benefit of tens of millions. He stated, yet, within these millions, there are innumerable fools who actually question the journalists exposing these issues. These critics commonly accuse the media of being manipulated by foreign forces or engaging in selective exposure. However, anyone sensible would realize that if the media were truly under foreign control, they would have been shut down and their staff arrested a long time ago. Selective exposure arises because the scope for media oversight is extremely limited, and managing to criticize even a few companies is seen as a significant achievement. But Chu also openly acknowledged, it wasn't like this 2 or 3 decades ago. Chu emphasized that the Beijing news aimed to safeguard the public, including some who criticized the paper, by exposing the tainted oil issue, highlighting a bitter reality where the newspaper's efforts to protect the public were met with betrayal. Chu also shared his own recent experiences. In June of this year, he wrote about industrial pollution in his hometown, citing 4 instances of environmental degradation, 2 reported by the Central Environmental Protection Inspection and 2 by the media. He stressed the importance of addressing frequent environmental problems in small areas. However, local officials in his hometown instructed public servants to denounce his report as a rumor. Chu Chaoxin's credentials include former positions at the Beijing News and Southern Weekly, and he has been honored twice as Journalist of the Year by the Southern Media Group. CCC Chief of Staff, block CCP's live organ harvesting, ensure U.S. companies are not exploited. On July 11, 2024, Piero Tozzi, Chief of Staff of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, CECC, representing CECC Chairman, New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith, and CECC Co-Chairman, Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, along with the Commission members, spoke at the Falun Gong July 20th anti-persecution rally in Washington, D.C., attended by thousands of Falun Gong practitioners and supporters. Tozzi stated that since Jiang Zemin initiated the persecution of Falun Gong in 1999, despite several changes in CCP leadership, the brutal persecution has never stopped, revealing the true nature of the CCP regime. He said, at its core, the communist regime does not care about the Chinese people but only about maintaining the power of the Chinese Communist Party. He recalled, 25 years ago, many Americans believed that engaging with the CCP government would promote change in China, thinking that increased investment and trade would improve the living conditions of the Chinese people and that the CCP might eventually respect the rule of law and possibly evolve into a fully democratic country. Based on such expectations, they welcomed China into the World Trade Organization. However, some in Congress were skeptical, such as Chris Smith from New Jersey, now the chairman of the CECC, and former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. They clearly saw that the fundamental nature of the CCP had not changed. It was always a regime that prioritized maintaining the Communist Party's power over genuinely caring for the people's welfare. Tozzi said, if we had observed closely 25 years ago, we would have seen the ruthless nature of the communist regime in all discussions about engagement, investment, and change, particularly evident in the persecution of Falun Gong. Look at the persecution of Falun Gong that started under Jiang Zemin in 1999. For Falun Gong practitioners, the persecution has remained consistent, once again revealing the true nature of this regime. Blocking CCP's organ harvesting, U.S. House of Representatives successively passes bills. Tozzi also stated that, among the many horrific human rights abuses against Falun Gong, I would like to particularly mention one, organ harvesting. In March this year, the CECC held a hearing titled Stopping the Crime of Organ Harvesting, What More Must Be Done? There is no doubt about the CCP's involvement in this extremely heinous crime. This crime was initially targeted at Falun Gong practitioners. He stated that to stop the CCP from continuing its atrocities, Americans need to constantly think, what more must be done? This was also the topic of the hearing. Tazi also listed 2 historic bills that were passed by the U.S. House of Representatives, saying, in March 2023, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2023, H.R. .1154, proposed by Chris Smith, the chairman of the CECC, and Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas introduced a corresponding bill in the Senate. This bill, H.R. .1154, is considered the most likely to become law and be signed by the President among the organ harvesting-related bills. It will prohibit perpetrators of organ harvesting from entering the United States and include them in the scope of sanctions. Meanwhile, the bill requires the Secretary of State to submit a report on organ transplant abuse. He mentioned the second bill. Last month, the House of Representatives also passed the Falun Gong Protection Act, H.R. .4132, initiated by Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania. Therefore, the House of Representatives has been fulfilling its duties. Prevent U.S. companies' technologies from being used in CCP's forced organ harvesting practices. Tazi urgently called for American companies to avoid complicity in CCP's human rights abuses, specifically the use of their technologies in live organ harvesting. He highlighted concerns about Medtronic's ECMO machines and Thermo Fisher Scientific's contributions to organ transplant processes. Tazi stressed the need for these companies to thoroughly investigate and ensure their technologies in China do not enable human rights violations. During a March hearing, there were allegations that Thermo Fisher Scientific's technology was used to identify organ harvesting victims. He also highlighted the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC's Rule 10b-5, which requires companies to provide accurate and complete information, questioning Thermo Fisher Scientific's compliance regarding their involvement in organ harvesting. Furthermore, he applied the same scrutiny to any listed company involved in forced labor practices affecting victims of religious and political persecution, including Falun Gong practitioners. Tazi emphasized, the persecuted are not merely statistics, they are real individuals, each living a life of flesh and blood. The CECC demands that the CCP release all detained Falun Gong practitioners. Returning to the rally, Tazi shared concrete examples from the families of 2 Falun Gong practitioners he met. The first is Zhou Daong, whose health has deteriorated drastically since his imprisonment in April 2021, resulting in the loss of nearly all his teeth. The second is Ho Lijun, who has been imprisoned since last year. Ho protested the persecution by going on a hunger strike, which led to even more severe punishments, including beatings, sleep deprivation, and being forced to sit on a small stool for extended periods. After his family exposed these tortures, he faced even harsher retaliation and subsequently vanished without a trace. Lastly, Tazi stated, the Congressional Executive Commission on China, on behalf of the families of Zhou Daong and Ho Lijun, and with their authorization, calls on the Chinese government to act humanely and release them. We also urge other U.S. government agencies to actively seek the release of all persecuted and imprisoned individuals. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.